Instead of merely reimagining the Western, Unforgiven sank it alive and sent it into oblivion. This hidden Japanese remake, along with a storyline from the 1970s and nearly axe performances, is just one of 20 incredible behind-the-scenes tidbits that will blow your mind. Tragedies, near misses, and daring gambles molded this timeless masterpiece. Do not leave until you reach number 1. That is the very last place you would have thought Unforgiven would end up. Here is the unsung tale of a masterwork that revolutionized a genre. David Webb Peoples penned the script for Unforgiven in 1976, which sat in a drawer for 16 years. This brings us to number 20, the script. The Cudhor Killings was the name of it. At the moment, studios were confused about how to use it. It didn't belong in Hollywood's romantic westerns. It was too bleak and violent. Everyone, not just damaged males, was depicted in a fictional account of the effects of gun violence. The candor put off all the major studios. Producers' offices were the ones that passed the script around, but it never took. There wasn't a stand-up protagonist, and the violence was overdone. For those living through the 1970s and 1980s, that was a major turnoff. The villains were always decent individuals, and the gunfights were always clean in westerns. For almost a decade, nobody paid attention to that since it wasn't in the screenplay for people. Blade Runner, written by Peoples in 1984, catapulted him to fame. That achievement breathed new vitality into his previous endeavors. Clint Eastwood was one of those who had the script before him. Eastwood preferred not to rework it or alter it in any way, unlike other individuals. Almost word for word, he planned to film it. While Eastwood did acquire the film's rights in 1985, he did not play William Money until much later in life. Older folks going to work was bound to be the plot point in his mind. The young gunslingers didn't connect with a story about remorse and the weight of consequences. In 1991, Eastwood chose the perfect year to film it. At last, the world was prepared to be inhabited by the story, but little had changed. Number 19. Francis Ford Coppola almost directed it before Eastwood grabbed the story. Francis Ford Coppola temporarily had the rights. Following his roles in Apocalypse Now and The Godfather, he became a Hollywood heavyweight. The script's honesty and moral gravity drew Coppola in. For the starring part, he seriously entertained the idea of John Malkovich. His rendition, however, was never even considered. Money became an impenetrable barrier that Coppola was unable to surmount. Even with a famous face attached, the script was still deemed too risky by the studios. Instead of praising the Western genre, they wanted one that celebrated it. Even the concept of Malkovich as a tired gunslinger failed to get many fans. The project was eventually shelved by Coppola. Although Coppola's drafts are unknown, those in the know claim that his vision would have been more bizarre. Imagine a world with less harshness and more surreal imagery, with suspense building slowly. The emphasis could have been more on atmosphere and less on bloodshed. A far more experimental, less commercial picture might have resulted from that. However, no one was prepared to take the risk because the budget would have grown rapidly. Having faith in westerns was something Eastwood brought to the table when he replaced Coppola. He knew just who would be able to enjoy this tale. Studios were reassured by Eastwood since he was a filmmaker who could shoot efficiently and within budget. He assured everyone that the film would be shot with very few alterations. In order to secure final approval, such guarantee was crucial. Although most people don't remember Coppola's brief involvement anymore, it reveals how unsure the project was at one point. Had been. It almost seemed like Unforgiven was something totally else. A stranger trajectory for the Western could have been possible had Coppola been successful. Due to the postponement, though, Eastwood was able to make his version, which completely flipped the genre on its head. Someone was expected to say something before the first shot was fired. Number 18. The deleted opening voiceover. When Unforgiven was initially put together, the picture began with a voiceover, but Clint Eastwood made a terrifying decision. The original intent was to lay forth William Money's backstory and foreshadow the troubled times to come. The narrator provided background information about his violent past and the circumstances behind his wife's murder. Just before finishing the edit, Clint Eastwood chose to take it out. To him, quiet would be more powerful. The film opens with a wide shot of Money digging slowly, rather than a voiceover telling the audience how to feel. Nothing but the wind and the fading light fills the air. The decision heightened a sense of unease and realism at the opening. Viewers were encouraged to observe and deduce the meaning on their own. The narration that was absent would have mitigated that severity. Although Eastwood was aware it wasn't essential, the voiceover was not badly written. He put his faith in the images to do the task. Cutting the narrative allowed the film to fully embrace its gritty realism. Emotions and motivations were not spoon-fed. Because of that alteration, the story had a stronger tone from the get-go. This decision was likewise unconventional. Narrators would frequently set the tone or provide backstory for characters in westerns. Turns out Eastwood did the exact opposite. Instead of relaxing, viewers leaned in due to the lack of sound. It was important in setting Unforgiven apart from all the other westerns. Earlier storyboards and script drafts still have the voiceover. It was videotaped, however. Never made public. What this means is that the studio was on board with Eastwood's decision. The film gained more impact by omitting exposition. Even before anyone says a word, the atmosphere is set. 17th point. Ruth Wood, Clint Eastwood's mother, had a brief appearance as a railway passenger in the film, but was ultimately cut. It was intended to be a brief visual appearance with no lines, simply serving as background. Being a part of her son's major project thrilled her. Her scene was trimmed from the final cut in order to improve pacing. Due to the film's condensed running time, Eastwood preferred no interruptions. Ruth was nonetheless invited to a private screening, despite the fact that her scene was not selected. As she watched the completed film, she couldn't help but be proud of her kid. Her disappearance from screen time was irrelevant. Witnessing the film's influence and lasting impact was what really counted. In her son's life, she saw him go from movie star to serious filmmaker. Although Ruth had been to the movies before, Unforgiven was her first. The subject matter was subjective. For Eastwood, and the presence of his mother on set added significance to the endeavor. It was difficult to cut her moment, but he had to put the film's needs first. Time was of the essence in setting the mood and advancing the plot. The film's raw edges didn't mesh well with a heartfelt cameo. However, the missing scene has yet to be located, leaving some fans hoping for its return. It is most likely kept in the vault of raw footage. It will be a historical artifact for the Eastwood family if it is ever released. At this point in time, it is still a minor plot point throughout the narrative. Just a friendly reminder that even the little things can go overlooked from time to time. Clint Eastwood had been working in the film industry for more than 35 years when he finally won his first Oscar in '92. He had become an international superstar after appearing in and directing a number of films. An Academy Award had eluded him, though. That was altered by Unforgiven. In addition to Best Picture and Best Director for Clint Eastwood, the picture took home 4 Oscars. That was a historic victory. After Cimarron in 1931, Unforgiven became the second Western to win Best Picture. That disparity reveals a great deal about the seriousness with which Westerns were received. The peaceful, contemplative, and profound nature of the genre was demonstrated by Eastwood's directing. Now it was more than simply gunfights. Eastwood's victory also signified a change in Hollywood's perception of him. A star in her own right. In recent years, he had established himself as a really accomplished filmmaker. His success was not due to his wit or showmanship, but rather to his straightforwardness, concentration, and honesty. Because of that method, the story was more impactful. The force of restriction was demonstrated to be equal to that of spectacle. Unforgiven was also nominated for Best Picture Editing and Best Supporting Actor, with Gene Hackman taking home the honors. All members of the team contributed strongly, as seen by those victories. It was a triumph for the entire production, not only for Eastwood. Every prize shown that the picture redefined the genre of westerns and shattered audience expectations. Few thought Eastwood would win an Oscar before Unforgiven. For years, he had gone unnoticed. The industry had finally caught up with him, and this victory was more than simply a trophy. Eastwood finally got his just desserts after decades of playing heroes when he showed how vulnerable they could be. Additionally, he proceeded without turning around. 15th point. John Malkovich nearly played William Money before Clint Eastwood took over directing Unforgiven. Francis Ford Coppola briefly oversaw the project. At that period, John Malkovich was considered heavily for the part of William Money. Malkovich was well known for his portrayal of nuanced and emotionally charged roles. However, he did concede afterwards that he would have been an odd choice for the role. His manner was very dramatic, and the plot was unpolished and realistic. The entire film's tone could have changed if John Malkovich had played the part. Changing the film's focus, he probably would have portrayed Money as more unhinged or creepy. In Eastwood's adaptation, the character gained a subtle gravitas and background that complemented the film's dusty reality. If Money had been more stylized, the brutality would have appeared less tragic and more strange. It would have been at odds with the message of the picture. Funding for Coppola's adaptation was difficult to come by. Several industry insiders held the opinion that Malkovich wasn't a Western's ideal leading man back then. Because it was too dark, too quiet, too violent, studios also had doubts about the project's viability. The concept of Malkovich playing Money quickly died out when Coppola relinquished the rights. With Eastwood's entrance, the course of events shifted dramatically. Even Malkovich admitted years later that it would have bombed. His intention was not to be modest. He just meant that the part required Eastwood's skills, which he lacked. History was brought to the table by Eastwood. Throughout his career, Money created a shadow that no one else could match, from spaghetti westerns to Dirty Harry.